May 15th, 2025. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we're going to be talking about painting miniatures. Yeah, we remain back from PAX. Last night, actually, I was at Emily's on the board of Recife East, which is like one of the animation organizations, and they have a film festival every year. So the film festival was last night, and because I'm a member, I get to vote in the film festival, and I can say it was one of the better crops of short animated films I've seen at this festival this year. And two, the award ceremony was great because I got to watch all the winners again.
Okay.
Yeah, we had it, but they have it every year at the Museum of the Moving Image. Every year they get the small theater there because it's cheaper, and every year there's no other event in the MoMI at that time, so they just put them in the big theater because why not?
All right, that was nice.
Yeah.
To let you have it for the big one for free.
Yeah, I mean,
no additional charge.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise it's just not going to be used, and they're going to have a bunch of us crammed into a much smaller theater in a different part of the building.
I would like to rent the creepy, smelly Egyptian theater in the back.
Ooh.
It's very uncomfortable to sit and watch in.
Should we
crappy and I think it's crappy and smelly on purpose in some ways. Just a bunch of benches in there to simulate the old times.
The old times were in most cases darker times in many ways, just across the board. Guess we get right into the news. Got any news?
Yeah, so people in New Jersey are freaking out that there's going to be a strike, which will disable New Jersey Transit, which brings tons of people, even with people working from home more nowadays. On any given weekday, it brings a shit ton of people from New Jersey into New York City, Manhattan, and then back.
And we will finally be able to stop their reign of terror in New York.
And so usually there's laws in place for people who are considered essential workers, which, of course, a train engineer operator is considered an essential worker.
Yep.
That you can't strike, or you can't strike so easily. You can't just be like, oh, you don't give us money, strike. Because, in a way, on the one hand, you're pro-labor, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? Right? But on the other hand, when you're an essential worker, it's almost, your striking power is almost too powerful because you just disrupt society. And it's like you could just demand, you can basically ransom society in a way.
True. But at the same time, a group of people who are that powerful, to a degree, should be able to ransom society within certain bounds.
Well, they should be fairly compensated, but not overly compensated, right? So consider, say, a teachers union, right? If the teachers, even in a small town, all strike, which usually is illegal, then it's like that whole town worth of parents like can't go to work, and it's just completely terrible. And it's like, okay, if the teachers demand a fair salary and accept it, okay, that's fine. But what if the teachers are like $1 million each? It's like, well, look, guys, but it's like, well, look, you better give it to us because we're holding this whole town hostage. Ah, shit, right?
Of course.
You can't have that.
There is weirdly, as much as I hate capitalism, a free market-ish solution to that situation. Let's say in a small town, all the teachers wanted $1 million a year or they'll quit. At that point, nobody's going to complain about the scabs.
Obviously. But I'm just saying is that that's the reason for those laws.
Yeah.
Laws that make striking illegal in some cases are not entirely invalid.
But they still require a significant amount of judicious review and consideration.
Right. So laws for the people who are striking, the train operators, the law is basically for them is very reasonable, I think, at least, based on my cursory knowledge of it, is that you can strike actually in that job, but only after you put in good faith several rounds of negotiating and offers and votes, and you go through every measure to see if you can come to an agreement on a labor deal. And if after a long time and lots of work put into it, you still can't agree, then you can finally strike. After like a ton of years, it takes. They've gone through that whole process of trying to negotiate, and the fact is, the offers they're getting, based on the available information, are not great. They're not keeping up with inflation. It's a raw deal. And also, there aren't actually that many, because as far as I can tell, it's only the people who drive the trains that are striking. It's not the other people. So it's a very small number of people. So to give them all a raise won't actually impact the train budget that much. Right?
Yep.
Because it's not like every person who works for all of Jersey Transit. It's just this one, team basically, that's being, poorly compensated, and they couldn't reach a deal. So the thing is, if you try to look online and look at the news about this strike that's coming, every single news article is basically, even just normal news sources, AP News, whatever, all they're talking about is the strike can happen when, and if it happens, what your transportation options are, etc.
Yeah, now think about that. What that's really saying is, hey, if these workers strike, here's how to cross the picket line.
Right. But none of the, taking Amtrak isn't crossing the picket line, right? Taking the bus isn't crossing the picket line.
Well, it depends on your context because, for example,
you have to steal the train or a scab.
No. It is also considered. So let's say, for example, a hotel, all the staff of a hotel go on strike, and you have a reservation at that hotel. If you go and stay in that hotel anyway, and thus consume the services of the scab workers.
What if you stay in a different hotel?
What if all the hotels in the city go on strike?
That don't go there.
What if you go to an Airbnb? Is that a hotel?
No.
Nah.
It's not. Anyway, the point is that all the articles I could find from normal news were none of them explained any information about the labor negotiations going on.
I wonder why. I wonder why the media apparatus of capitalism is not going to talk about the nuances of a very critical strike.
And so the only article I could find quickly, within a few minutes, that talked about the actual labor negotiations is admittedly a heavily biased on the labor side op-ed.
Which is the correct side, like, just to be clear. GeekNights is biased, pro-labor.
Despite its bias, it does contain the facts of the situation in the op-ed as well as the op. So if you can find an article that is just the facts of the labor negotiation, we can replace this link with one that isn't biased in favor of the good guys.
Yeah. Though at the same time, that whole thing, that panel Emily and I did on meta context is really like, it boils down to the idea that you should always take a side on things that matter, and you should have an opinion.
But anyway. But yeah, that's a thing that's happening.
I had a coworker. So in our friend circles, there's a little meme that happens where someone says something that certain people would find bad, but a lot of people would secretly find good, and the response is a very sarcastic, "Oh no!" So at work today, people were talking about the strike, and one of my coworkers who works in New Jersey was like, "Wait, so you're going to tell me that I won't be able to get into the office if this happens?" And then he says, "Oh no!" So I hope they strike, I hope they get what they're asking for, but also kind of hope they strike to get what they ask for, because we need more examples of threats of strikes and strikes working to remind people who have forgotten that strikes are basically the only way we've gotten pretty much anything related to labor and quality of life in America in our entire history. Which leads to, a lot of people talk about if, the Trump regime and all the fascism that's happening gets bad enough, like, what do you do about it? And revolutions are really hard. And a lot of people will throw out, and I do this too, they throw out the idea of the real way to stop that is a general strike. Like a good chunk of society shuts everything down until the fascism's gone. And think about how hard it is to even convince people around a strike of a very small organization that affects the people who transport themselves via one set of trains between two states in the Northeast. Trying to get enough people across an entire country to strike enough to get a demand met that is somewhat bigger than that is almost impossible. So a lot of people throw strikes around really casually.
The problem is that when you do get people to strike, as you can see in this train situation, right? Normal people who might agree and be opposed to, say, whatever your demands are, right? We already discussed, they might not know about those demands because it's not in the news.
Yep.
But B, their lives are disrupted, right? And that's sort of the point.
Mm-hmm.
But when your life is disrupted, in a way, the natural thing to do is to be mad.
Yep.
To be mad at who caused the disruption in the immediate sense, which would be the striker, and to get that person educated, even if they're in their heart a good person, for them to understand the situation and to be okay with it, right? Not only do they have to be okay with it, but they have to also, right, basically, because they're being harmed, they have to be okay with continuing to be harmed. In effect, they need to now not only agree, but to care so much that they are okay sacrificing. Because when you go on strike, you're sacrificing, right?
Yeah.
The train operators are not going to get paid when they're striking. They'll get
And
$100.
they might lose and just all get fired and be fucked. The air traffic controllers who striked back in the day, Reagan just fucked them all over, and the air traffic controller industry never recovered.
To be mad enough that you take a risk and self-sacrifice and that's basically is your ammunition is that you're sacrificing something you want it that badly, and that also is what makes it work. And so, but to convince someone that's like to cross that line to where it's like, it's so bad that I will do this, right? The ultimate being, of course, right, war, which is like, it's so bad I will die to fix the situation, right?
Yep.
Just less, right? It's so bad I will lose my money to fix this situation. It's so bad I'll go on a hunger strike. I'll starve to fix this situation. To make someone care that much, especially when they could just say no and have bread and circuses still. Society hasn't completely collapsed yet. It's hard to get someone to cross that line.
Yep.
Even if they're a good person who wishes you got your demands.
So what I'll link to is, and again, I'm not necessarily endorsing this organization yet because I'm digging into them more, but there's an org called General Strike US that seems to be the most, they have, but they're the most well organized around the concept of a general strike in combination with being the most pragmatic about how it could even work and what you would need to do to set the stage to even have the possibility of having one. So if you're interested in like the big picture of where all this labor movement could go, I say this is an org you should check out. And what I'm going to link to is a simple little PDF, like there's a screenshot of it too, that gives you like, here are the things you should learn about if you want to be a part of this kind of thing in the future. This is like baby's first step. Like if you don't know how the coal strikes went down back in the day, you're fucked if you want to join a labor movement now. Like you've got to learn the history of this stuff. And it's easy to learn. Like Wikipedia exists, even if the media doesn't talk about this that well. Which leads to another point of what Scott said earlier. So about how the media is framing this a certain way. You shouldn't be using Twitter, and you definitely shouldn't be using Twitter's Grok AI. Like, it's all fascist bullshit. But it's gotten to the point of extreme dark comedy. If you're unaware, Elon Musk is, of course, a Nazi and a racist and a white supremacist. And he basically was mad that if people asked his AI about the fake idea of white genocide or the South African fascists that the U.S. is now giving asylum to, it basically said, that's all bullshit. These people are racist. And he got really mad about this. So they forced Grok, this AI, to super endorse fascism. Like specifically to the point that if people are asking it, it literally will say, I have been instructed to assume that white genocide is real. It says those exact words if you ask it. But what this did is now regular ass Twitter people who don't know about all this nonsense because they don't read the news, have never read a book, don't go outside, like whatever, these people, anyone who asks Grok about anything, it kind of just starts talking about South Africa and the Boers and white genocide, no matter what you're asking it. Like, that is the extreme that they have pushed this thing to. And it's kind of just an example of the same progression that Scott talked about, where all the media like frames a story the same way. These big tech companies, the media interests that are very wedded to capitalism, they are all trying to manipulate the narrative directly. It's very hard to find facts, and it's very hard to find places where you can even read opinions that aren't part of that machine.
Well, to be fair, all those news, the normal news as I was talking about, weren't lying. All their news was true. It's just they were just
Well, all right. Here's an example.
And they're only reporting, and they're thinking, right? The person who wrote that story or even the editors or publisher isn't thinking about it this way. They're thinking, who is our reader? What information do they want to know? They want to read, oh shit, they need to know about this.
Yeah.
It'll impact their lives that it's happening. And
But
their question, so they're thinking of serving their audience. They're not thinking about, it's like they're thinking, who wants to read about the labor negotiations?
well,
Yeah, so that's their line of thought.
for a lot of larger news organizations, there is editorial pressure where op-eds will be chosen to be.
I'm not talking about op-eds. I'm talking about
Yeah.
the factual stories.
But even the factual reporting, a bunch of people have resigned from WAPO and other organizations recently because even their factual reporting was edited by the editors to make sure they implied things. And, think about me. How many times have you encountered me as a person at no point lying and yet clearly attempting to misdirect someone in a particular direction?
I'm just saying is that they're not, it's not so sinister like a conspiracy.
Oh, I'm not. It doesn't need to be a conspiracy. That's the worst thing. You get it when you get a rhetorical consensus.
You can't, like, if you got some leftist person going, "Hey, I can't trust that media," you sound just like the crazy right wing person who's like, "Hey, I can't trust that media. I gotta read the crazy right wing nut job news," right? It's like,
Well, I think it's more that conspiracies are not necessarily intentional, and they're not conspiracies in traditional sense. Sometimes there's a sort of rhetorical consensus among like all the institutions in a space that tends to reflect whatever's happening in the background politically. Like a lot of news reporting tends to converge on a certain way of reporting, a certain set of facts that are omitted, and no one person is sitting there thinking, aha, I will frame this way. It sort of naturally happens the way news gets reported, and it's always happened. It's not something new.
anyway.
But anyway, things of the day. So there are two terms. I knew about football hooligans, but I didn't know a lot about them. Like other than weirdo, violent people who care too much about their sport, and those people exist in.
All I've known is that people are so crazy about soccer, even more so crazy than people are about like college football in the U.S. or other sport. And a certain segment of those people, the stadiums are so big and the crowds are so big and the people are so crazy and they got nothing else to do and they're way more organized, and so they can chant and they can light pyrotechnics and sing a whole fucking song together, and then some of them are so crazy that they get violent and throw rocks, especially if there's visiting fans or if there's a something bad happens in the game or whatever.
Like
that was my knowledge.
Yeah, take the worst Eagles fans and multiply them by like 10 was what I thought of these people.
Yeah.
But so this is a Sky News thing, and Sky News is a mixed bag, but it's a little sort of like textual mini documentary about the football hooligan ultras. And thus I learned some terminology.
They said that they're not hooligans. They said they're ultras. It's different.
Yeah, and they're all white supremacists. So here's the deal.
All the Europeans who knew this already are being like, oh, you Americans just found out about it.
Yeah, because you know what? For all the things that are wrong about Americans, our worst football bullshit isn't even close to like a Tuesday in Scotland. So basically what I learned is one set of terminology. There are the people who call themselves ultras don't like the term hooligan because they use that term disparagingly to refer to people from Eastern Europe. Two, ultras and casuals are two very specific kinds of hooligans. The casuals are quote more dangerous ones because the casuals dress like a normal person, so they fit into the crowd, but they carry weapons and they'll jump fans of the other club. But the ultras are so confident they will advertise that they are ultras looking for a fight and try to find people to fight with in the open, sometimes with police watching them. Like they give zero fucks.
Somebody who is a dangerous, violent nut job, but they know that the other team has also dangerous, violent nut jobs, and they've created some scenario where somehow they can find each other and fight acceptably, and they like fighting.
Yep.
And these are dangerous people who should not be welcome in society.
Yep, they will fight to death. Like, it is horrible. And a lot of bystanders get hurt. And that narrative of the ultras find other ultras to fight is also complete bullshit. They are almost all fronts for white supremacist groups, far right-wing groups, and also organized crime. And this sort of picture of like their culture being just part of soccer culture seems to be mostly manufactured to give them a weird sort of societal plausible deniability.
A form of sports washing, perhaps?
Yeah. So I highly recommend you read through this. This was a fascinating look into this view. These are
It's a little bit like in Japan when the Yakuza have a friendly festival.
Yep. Except what if the friendly festival was, hey, you wanna get together and break each other's legs?
Well, the soccer part is the festival, and then like the other part.
Yeah, this all came from a FARC thread that was just about some of these hooligans were having a, I guess, flare gun fight, but they were having it in a gas station. So anyway, what do you got?
What do I have?
I know what you have. You have a movie. A movie.
There was a thing called Kung Fury, right? You might like hear that if you don't know about it. You might have heard that term before. It sounds like you could just imagine what Kung Fury is.
It sounds like the name of a video game if I didn't know anything.
Right, from the name. But basically, it was a short comedy feature from like 2015 or so that they kickstarted. It was really low budget. It wasn't that long, and it was basically, extreme 80s kung fu action parody kind of deal, right? And so that exploded, and it was kind of a hit in a way, right? And they managed to make a real full-length Kung Fury movie, I think around 2018 or so.
With a $34 million budget.
Yes. So it started out as just this little feature thing, and now it became a real thing with Schwarzenegger and Hasselhoff and Fassbender. It's like a big fucking thing. But that movie, which is, as far as I can tell, done, right?
Yep.
A done movie, much like the Wile E. Coyote movie.
Principal photography was done in 2019, and post-production was in progress in 2020, and then stopped because of the thing you're about to say.
Yes, there is some sort of legal limbo surrounding this movie that has prevented it from appearing in theaters anywhere, even though it would probably be successful.
So at some point they resumed post-production. It's not clear if they did this, legal, like in terms of like the lawsuit, but the movie was finished in April of 2024. It is like ready to be seen.
Yeah, I think it says on Wikipedia that post-production stopped because a lawsuit involving unpaid funds from a major investor. So apparently, I guess they had money to do everything, but they couldn't continue the post-production. They ran out of money, or they had to wait for the lawsuits to finish, or it was supposed to come out in 2022. So it's already several years past due. Anyway, somebody found, it's not a trailer.
It's a sizzle reel.
Yeah, it's a sizzle reel. So what these are for, if you've never seen one, is they basically compress the movie into a very short amount of time, like 10 minutes or so that somebody who is making Hollywood decisions can effectively see the whole movie, but also be sold on the movie by like a narrator, perhaps, at least in this case. But it's basically a vehicle to sell the film, show someone the whole film, so that they maybe own theaters, or maybe they're a producer, or there's someone in Hollywood who has to make decisions regarding this film. How many screens to give it, but they can't sit there and watch the whole freaking movie right now, right? So a trailer is not going to be enough. They need to know the whole plot, and they need to see everything that there is to see to make their decisions. But they don't want to spend 90 minutes or 2 hours. So you make a sizzle reel to sell the film on these people, later in production, right? And so this has leaked. It's still on YouTube somehow, but I have it backed up in case it disappears.
I think the whole internet backed this thing up as soon as they found out about the dinosaurs and who the villain is.
Yeah. So this is pretty incredible, and it's You should watch it, and if they take it down, you can find it again somewhere else easily, because it's just like, I don't think you could go further than this. This is like the limit of, just going all in.
I think if you went further, it would just become soup.
They had no more chips to play. It's sort of like putting the final stamp.
Like I'd say, imagine you're watching a movie and you're like, oh man, wouldn't it be awesome if, and then that thing immediately happened. And you kept saying that over and over for the entire movie to where you ran out of things to say. Like, what if the moon ridden by a dinosaur crashed into the earth, catapulting us into the punch dimension, and then and they're like, all right, that already happened in the movie. Now what?
Even the likes of people like Studio Trigger would just like tip their hat to this fucking thing, right?
Now, I wonder, it is not out of the realm that those legal issues have been resolved and this leak was intentional.
Regardless of whether there was it was leaked on purpose or by accident, you can watch it, and therefore you should, and it may even save you the time of seeing the real movie when it comes out, because you're basically seeing the whole movie.
Yeah. I mean, think about Snakes on a Plane. Not a good movie, but a sizzle reel of that is you would get 100% of what you would have gotten out of watching the whole movie.
Yeah. If Snakes on a Plane and Kung Fury are both drugs, Snakes on a Plane is like a cigarette. Fury is Mount Fuji made of cocaine.
In the Meta Moment, the Book Club book is everything for everyone. Oral history of the New York Commune, 2052 to 2072. Expect us to do the episode mid-ish June. It shouldn't take us that long to read this book. I got to go to Germany for a week, like this third week of June. So the worst case scenario, we do it right when I get back, because
that sounds good.
Yeah, because I am guaranteed to finish the book if I haven't finished it by then on this trip.
Very little. My calendar is super empty right now because PAX is over.
Yep.
It's warm. There's no hockey to watch or anything like that. There's playoff hockey, but so I've been watching Queen Millennia.
Nah.
I'm done with that. I'll have nothing to do except read. So
get right into the main bit. So I'm just gonna start before all of you nerds out there. On a scale of 1 to 10 of skill at painting miniatures, 10 being a master and 1 being unable to do it, I think I'm in the Square Root Club. Like, I am so bad at this, it's kind of hilarious. So
I might be a 2 or 3, I would say.
I think you spend more time. Well, I did it a lot when I was in middle school, but I was really bad at it. I got better at it in high school when I learned some basic things, and then I just stopped doing it for the most part. I haven't painted a miniature in at least a decade, maybe more.
I've done it less than 10 times. I can probably just remember all handful of miniatures I've ever painted. Mostly been at paint and take type events where there was like, I did one miniature and I'm like, ta-da, I did it.
Yep.
I'd never really like had a pile of miniatures that I tried to paint all at once. I bought a little mini painting kit and I painted one miniature in it, and there's 3 that I didn't paint yet.
Where I got started was actually at Hero Quest. Play like me and my brother played it with our dad, like all the way through.
Hero Quest
Yeah, because I remember in the ads they all were like cool and painted, and when I got the game, they weren't painted. And a friend of mine was like, "Oh yeah, all those things are like that. Of course you paint them yourself. That's just why didn't you know that? I thought you played D&D. I thought you were a nerd." So I got a bunch of paints. Not really knowing anything. Like, I went to the hobby shop and I was like, all right, I'm going to need some black because I'm painting skeletons. I'm going to need some red and some gold and silver color because I'm painting like orcs with armor. And then I started trying to paint them, and every one of them somehow looked worse. And to this day, if we go get my Hero Quest set, there's like 5 skeletons that are painted in varyingly different bad ways. And then I just gave up. But then later, I started playing a lot of D&D. And in high school, I remember my game master, Dan, was fantastic. And we played, he is the reason I think I've still played more D&D than I've played any other RPG, except maybe Blades in the Dark as of now, because of how much D&D we played. But he and his brother were crazy good at painting miniatures. And we were also dedicated to our game. He was cool enough he painted my character from our second campaign fully in excruciating detail on one of those 1-inch scale miniatures. Like, he must have used a single hair to paint some of those details. I still have it. I should get my mom to send it to me. It looks amazing. And I remember I asked him one time, like, oh, would you paint another one? He's like, yeah, but you got to pay if you want more than one. I cared about that character. I don't care about whatever you're doing now. And he wanted a lot of money because it's a pain in the ass to do this thing, kind of thing.
Sure is. But yeah, painting minis is really awesome. It's a great hobby, I'd say. It's very creative and there's lots of, room for expression. It's a fun game. Just painting minis is cool. Right?
A lot of people do just paint the minis and don't play the games those minis are related to.
Yeah, it's totally awesome.
Also, a lot of people there is a culture of painting minis to then use in dioramas or displays that were never part of a game.
Right. So the thing is, despite watching many YouTube videos and trying to really study and figure it out, and it's like, I even had that kit I got, it's up on the shelf there. I had like instructions of like, first, you want to prime it. Okay. So you spray it with a primer to cover the whole thing, and that makes it so the paint will stick to it nicely, right? And then you go with some sort of base coat where you're sort of, broadly putting the colors for different parts of the mini, right? Maybe all the skin parts get a skinish color and the armory parts get an armory color. And then you go in with like, some washes or some dry brush and you start detail, right? And it's like, I saw videos and all those techniques and then I attempted them and they kind of worked a little bit, but not really.
Well, my experience, it was really that this is the kind of hobby where if you want to get good at it, you have to learn all the techniques and learn all that sort of craft, but then you just have to do it a lot to build the dexterity and the skills, and you're going to build a lot of soft and creative knowledge that you're never going to get from reading anything or watching anything.
Yeah, it's like you could watch someone apply like a wash to like fill in the nooks and crannies on some armor like 20 times, and then you just do it yourself, and it's like
it just looks like shit, and you're like, I did it exactly the way he did. What's different?
It works a little bit, but then there's like a blob there. It's like that guy didn't have that blob. It's like, what am I supposed to do?
But you didn't thin your paint enough if you get a blob there.
I don't know, you thinned it too much, you didn't thin it enough. Right kind of paint. Is it,
yep. Oh wait, you're painting polyurethane, now you gotta paint pewter.
Right. And one good thing is that the miniatures, especially if they're not like super expensive ones, right? Because you can buy really expensive, highly detailed minis, but if you buy something for like $15, it's like, you better damn well be good at painting that shit. Otherwise, what are you doing, right? You're better off buying a bunch of cheap crap miniatures, even just like some fucking army men or something.
Which is partly why I had so much trouble, because I didn't have a lot of money. So the miniature scale I always bought were those 1-inch tall ones, because they were like $5 or $6 at the hobby shop tops for like a pack of them, and they had pretty fine detail. The problem is, the smaller the miniature is, like, that exponentially increases the skill required to do it well.
But when you get a miniature that requires, it doesn't say it requires less skill, but what happens is you think, okay, I'll buy a bigger one. That way I won't need to be so precise with my dexterity. It's like, the bigger one, they just cram on more details.
Yep.
Like, shit.
And the bigger one, when you fuck up, it's so much more obvious. Like, I never, ever got an eye to look right. They were always bug-eyed, wall-eyed. Like, I started just painting the eyes black.
Dot in there, and it's like, that's the smallest dot I can make, and the dot is like bigger than the eyeball. Even with the tiniest brush available, and I just put the tiniest paint on it, and it's like, I come in, I basically like whisper the brush near the eyeball. Nope, giant dot.
Yep.
I don't know. I saw them do it on YouTube. It would look just fine, not me. There are, however, a few things, despite me not having that much experience with miniatures painting, because of my YouTube research, there are a few things, only a few, that I'm confident in saying are a good idea, right? One good idea, some kind of holder, right? There are lots of different holding devices you can buy, because if you paint a miniature, you're not just leaving it on the table and like painting it while it's sitting there. I mean, you could, but you'll sort of bump it and move it around. You need to keep it still. But you also want to paint all sides of it. And if you got to rotate it, well, now you got to fucking touch it. So it's like, what part are you touching? The base? I want to paint the base. Right? So you could, at bare minimum, sort of like just use some like goop to sort of temporarily stick it to like the top of a soda bottle. And that would actually be like, that would get you there, right? You can just hold the soda bottle, rotate the miniature, and paint to your heart's content, rotate to all sides. But they do sell things specifically for this purpose that if you're painting a lot of miniatures, you might want to buy one just for the ergonomic aspect.
Yep.
It's the same reason, like if you're going to, put frosting on a cake, you get a cake tray, the spinning cake tray things. Same kind of deal.
Yep.
If I was going to paint a lot of miniatures, I would definitely get one of these things that does that.
The second thing you should absolutely get, because when I borrowed my friends, it was just like a force multiplier. Get a jeweler's loupe. That
can help. That can help.
That'll help so much more than you think it will.
Yep. Another thing that I saw while researching on the internet, but I haven't tried, so I don't really know if it's worth it or not, but in theory it's worth it, is there's a wet palette. So when I've painted, I just had like my palette was always just like a piece of a plastic tray.
Yep.
And maybe had some indents in it, and you would just, the miniatures paint comes in, I would personally, I think you can get it in little like jars, but the jars are difficult in my opinion, and also wasteful because they could dry out. I like it better when the paint comes in the little droppers, because then you can drop out one drop and seal it, and that paint will basically stay moist and not dry out and get wasted, and you can basically make the paint go along a longer distance, right? Because it's not in the jar. But you put the dropper, you drop it onto your palette, and then of course it sits on the palette. You mix it, you paint with it, you water it down, whatever you're gonna do, and then you go away and you're done painting miniatures for today, and you come back tomorrow, and any paint that was left over on your palette is just dried out and useless, and you basically kind of have to use a different area of the palette, or maybe try to rehydrate it. Probably not going to work that great. Just start over, basically. And all the paint you squirted out of your bottles and didn't use is gone, effectively. There's a thing called a wet palette, which is basically a rectangular box with a lid, and you wet a piece of paper or like, some sort of, medium, and you use that as your palette, and it keeps the paint moist. And you can even close the lid and come back tomorrow, and it's still moist, and you can just start painting right away, as it, even though you went away for hours, as long as it didn't completely dry out, and you can add some more water in there. It's obviously some work to manage one of these because you have to maintain it and, whatever, but if you're painting a lot of miniatures on a regular basis, that's your hobby. I can't imagine, I could be wrong, but I can't imagine that this is not a good thing to figure out. You could make your paint last so much longer. And that'd be pretty terrific. Probably considering the cost of paint, the little wet palette would pay for itself in short order.
Now, what I was thinking about this, and like, what's interesting to me, thinking back about my relationship with minis and miniature painting over the years, is that when I got into D&D, I thus got into a lot of the media about D&D. I'd be hanging out in Usenet forums and IRC groups talking about D&D. I'd read Dragon Magazine. I'd go to hobby shops, and every one of these spaces, a lot of the advertising was minis. Like, minis were really pushed.
Money on that shit. That's why.
Yep.
High margin business.
But also, what I remember is that very few people I knew engaged with the minis, either because they didn't have money or they just didn't care because they didn't play those games. And the only people I knew who got really good at mini painting were game masters. But I didn't really know anyone who played like Warhammer type games who would have like a big army. Like, I was mostly in the D&D side, but I just learned something crazy trying to look up the details. Do you remember Rhodium?
No.
It's an alloy. So, back in the day, there weren't really plastic minis, and like a lot of people would consider.
When I first knew about it, it was all pewter.
It was all pewter, and if you don't know, pewter is full of lead. Like, not great. So, minis became an extremely controversial topic among nerd circles in the early 90s. Like, I remember articles in Dragon Magazine about it, and the controversy was, I didn't realize this was fucking Mario Cuomo who was involved in this. So,
Okay.
New York State changed the D&D and Ral Partha miniatures industry by proposing that children's toys and miniature figurines shouldn't have lead in them. And
Common sense.
the nerds went fucking crazy protesting against this. They wanted their lead. They complained that if you don't have lead, the pewter sucks. Like, you can't, it's bad minis. You can't have, it's terrible. To the point, they bothered Cuomo so much, he relented, and he actually made sure New York State's public health law carved out an exception for hobbyist miniatures so they could continue to have lead forever. That piece of shit. However, during this debacle, Ral Partha, which was like the miniatures company at the
I
time.
know about Ral Partha only because in the BattleTech book I had, it mentioned them specifically as making BattleTech miniatures.
Oh, I owned a lot of Ral Partha miniatures because actually when we played D&D, we usually just used unpainted pewter miniatures.
Meanwhile, I haven't seen a Ral Partha miniature at anywhere.
I don't know if I ever not. I haven't really poked around the miniatures areas, but
I haven't seen one since like the Millennium days. Are they even in business?
I don't know. So anyway, Ral Partha developed an alloy that was pretty much as good as pewter for making little miniatures. They trademarked it. They called it Relidium, and they started. They phased out pewter, and they migrated all their miniatures to Relidium. And again, the nerds flipped the fuck out and like tried to boycott them. They demanded their lead. They did this only because New York State was about to ban it and they wanted to get ahead of the game. And the nerds complained that Relidium was like too soft and couldn't hold fine detail, but no, it was fine. They were just nerds making crap up. So when they got Cuomo to give up on this, the nerds all celebrated, and then Ral Partha was like, yeah, we're still not putting lead back in our miniatures because we're not evil. Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? It's Relidium forever. Pound sand. And
nowadays, most miniatures you see are plastic or like
Yep.
even flexible kind of plastic. Like that little minis kit that I bought that had like, super cheap and had like 4 minis, 3
Yep.
minis in it. They're like Reaper minis, and like you can bend the swords on them. And
Yeah.
that's a little. I gotta say that does make them a little annoying to paint. That's not ideal. Ideally, the miniature would be completely firm, but as long as it's completely firm and the paint sticks to it. As a person with no experience, I don't really see how anything else matters.
yeah.
It's like, as long as it's solid and it has the details in it, and it's you can sand away or smooth it or sculpt it or carve it or chop it, whatever. In some ways the plastic is kind of better. Like you can take the arm off one guy and you could customize it more easily. Glue, trying to cut an arm off a metal guy, not as great, I'd say.
Well, if it was Relidium, it was really easy.
Oh, that's good.
Pewter, like, also easy, but you're getting lead everywhere.
Yeah, not great.
So I learned something else that I didn't know, because I remember around that time, the miniatures industry and like Ral Partha had a big crash. Like there's a big crash, oversupply, demand cratered. Like there was like the industry had a little like mini crisis for a while. What I didn't know until just now, and it kind of fits with the overall narrative of who was buying all these miniatures, the collectors more so than the gamers. Apparently, what caused the crash, the nerds blamed the shift to Relidium. But what really happened, the crash started right when Magic the Gathering was launched. And it seems like the people who were buying miniatures just en masse started buying Magic cards instead and had a finite amount of money to spend on nerd stuff, and Magic became the collectible thing, and that seems to be what crashed the miniatures industry in the early 90s. Relidium had nothing to do with it.
The story is a bit different in the UK, where especially the UK, but also other places. Games Workshop, Warhammer have always, in my impression, been way bigger in other places than the US.
Oh yeah, every time I used to travel for work, there's a Game Workshop like shop almost anywhere I went.
Yeah, because Games Workshop is a UK company.
Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, it seems like the hobby has always been bigger elsewhere, although it has been in the US, like less so. Right. And the other thing is that if you think about someone owning a game store, right? It's like if you got board games, it's like maybe someone loves board games so much they keep buying more and more of them. But it's like not really. You kind of you pick and choose which
Yep.
ones you're gonna get, right? And
Well, look at Millennium. They're the biggest game store in America officially. They have a whole thing about it. They keep like 1 or 2 copies of a wide variety of games,
Right.
but they don't have like a giant pile of one game or anything.
what I'm just saying is that as a single customer isn't going to keep returning to your store and buying board games constantly, right? A single customer, even if they play D&D, isn't going to keep coming to the store and buying a D&D book like every week or anything.
They'll buy every D&D book that comes out, but there's only so many of those.
Right. But if somebody, is coming to your store constantly and keeps buying stuff all the time, a regular customer, it has to either be collectible cards or miniatures, right? If it's miniatures, it's like you can't. It's a hobby where you can just keep buying. You just show up at the game store. Oh, here's some new miniatures I can paint. I painted all the ones I have, or you probably didn't, but you can get more, right? You can get more Gundams you didn't build. You can get a color of paint you don't have. Maybe you ran out of a color of paint. You need to replenish it. Maybe one of your brushes is ruined. You need a new one. It's a hobby that requires a constant stream of consumption as opposed to some other gaming hobbies. And so if you're a store, selling miniatures is a profitable way to go because you can have regular customers that bring in steady cash flow some amount. Whereas the only other thing that's going to do that is trading card games. The other kind of games, the cash flow will not be steady. It will be bumps and this and that. And
Also, just think about your stock. Miniatures, unlike even board games or books, won't go bad even if like your shop is moist. They will just sit there. They will be fine. I remember at Millennium, there were a lot of miniatures in those, and they take up almost no space. So there's that rack in the back you could twist that had all the little miniatures and the little like plastic and cardboard boxes. I remember some of them were covered in so much dust, I assume they had been there since before our WAG was founded.
Right, but they still have the same value effectively. They might be for a game that no one plays.
Yep.
But if you're just interested in painting and that's the miniature of the thing and so the design of it appeals to someone.
Yeah, it doesn't go bad. It doesn't go out of fashion.
Yeah, it's not like a board game that's old and kind of janky. It's not like an old version of D&D that no one wants to play anymore. An old RPG that's offensive.
Yeah.
It's not an old trading card game where it could be one that's old where the prices go way up because it's old if it's popular. But an old trading card, it's like, those cards are illegal now, right? It's like, it's a miniature is a miniature. It doesn't matter when it's made, and doesn't take up a lot of space, and the margins are high. The cost to produce them is not that high necessarily.
Yep.
The designer has to design it and sculpt it, and then you can mass manufacture it. And the mass manufacturing, each one, it's not even an action figure which moves. It's just a little mini, right? If it's made of plastic, it's really cheap, and then you sell it for Warhammer prices, and then the store adds more margin on top of that. And yeah, it's a good business to be in.
Yep, this is why there's paint and takes at all the nerd cons, because that costs them almost nothing to run. And if even one person is like, ooh, this is really fun, and they start buying miniatures, you got another customer. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like it's a bad hobby. It's not lead anymore.
Yeah. One thing I can say is that there seem to be a few brands of paint, and I don't know which brand is the best because what do I know, right? Every brand I've used in the few times I've done it has seemed about the same, good enough. Get at least, maybe someone will tell me the reason that the YouTube videos didn't work is because I was using cheap paint. Maybe, I don't know. I have heard from Miniatures Nerds is that there's the official Games Workshop brand of paint that is supposedly, according to people, everyone I've heard actually, that it's overpriced, but it's good, but it's overpriced. But there are other brands that are cheaper and perhaps even better. And, all I'm saying is you don't got to buy the official biz, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many. In fact, at PAX Unplugged, there were so many booths that were selling like paint related stuff that were various brands because it's not like there's some patent on the idea of paint. It's like there was one company that had like all these really cool colors of paint, like crazy neon colors. I was like, ooh, that just makes me want to paint just seeing those colors.
Yeah.
So you should look. There's a lot of smaller companies out there that are in this biz. If you don't know, just go to look at like the PAX Unplugged map from the expo hall, and just try to go through all the companies, find their websites, and you'll see some of them sell mini stuff, or a significant number of them. And you'll see like, oh, it's not a big company you've heard of, but look, they're selling really, they're selling things that when they're on display make someone who's not in the hobby consider the hobby. That's
Yeah.
at least their sell is good. I don't know if the reality is good.
Yeah. And the only advice, if you're interested in this kind of hobby, I think the thing you have to just be ready for is that take it slow, and you should enjoy the methodical, slow, technical work of doing it. If your goal is to get a finished, well-painted mini and you're not interested in enjoying the process, I don't think you're going to like mini painting.
Yeah. I think that if you're going to do mini painting, you have to recognize that you're going to make a bunch of bad minis.
Yep.
So you should get a bunch of cheapy ones and, good enough paint and brushes and what. And if paint the cheapy ones, try really hard and see if you can just make the next one better than the previous one.
Yep.
And watch the YouTube videos and, don't just do the techniques one time, but like practice the techniques on every single one. And if you improve, once you reach the point where like you paint a mini and you go, damn, that actually is badass. Once you reach that level on a cheapy mini, now is the time you can go and buy something else. Right. And you'll learn what you actually need to get.
And don't fall into the trap I fell into when I was young that a lot of people do. You start painting, you think it works okay, and then you immediately try to do washes or dry brushing. Like, wait on that until you get good at the basics.
Yeah, it's not the kind of hobby, I think, where you can, start off with something high end, right? Like playing video games, it's like you can get a big gaming PC immediately. You don't need to wait and get a cheap gaming PC, first, right? It's like, what's the point? The game, But with this, unless you already know that you're good at painting, maybe other kind of painting or drawing or some other art.
Maybe you do model train dioramas, so you're a perfect fit for this.
Yeah, unless you have some related skill already and you know you're going to be good at it, I would start with cheapies.
Yep.
And if you stick with it, go harder. Otherwise, if you don't stick with it, what was the harm? You'll be like me. You have one little mini painting kit with 3 minis in it.